But I almost want to start from the very beginning. Like, what was your childhood like? Did you get into construction at an early age?
Yeah, you really want to go way back.
Let's do it.
Definitely always been drawn into the industry. I had, my dad, we were making stuff when I was a kid. We made a soapbox car, he'd let me use the power tools. My uncle was extremely handy. He was a glazer. I was an apprentice wrestling coach, got me into drywall. So I even had my own deck building business in the latter half of my college years. But then I fell into an internship with Clark, just making the move from Lotus 123 to Excel. We were still using some form of a spreadsheet to create our log. At that point in time in my career, I was just trying to learn the craft and master that at every, stage. Every promotion was just learning and expanding responsibilities. That I had great mentors, and Clark did a wonderful job teaching and training, but also giving you the opportunity to go do it and learn from your mistakes.
It's kind of like teaching yourself math without a calculator before you start using the calculator, and how much greater you'd be at teaching the calculator great tricks if you knew how the math actually worked, if that makes any sense. Do you resonate with that?
I do, and that's kind of a cornerstone of why ConCntric is so powerful and beneficial, and why it's been so well received. Is all of those years and that experience is, industry specific, pre-construction specific, and, all of that experience is guiding what we're building.
I've got Steve Dell'Orto here with me from ConCntric, but just been excited to talk to you for a while, Steve, because your long experience at Clark, you basically, from what I've read, built the west coast of Clark and spent 25 plus years there. I'm sure you've got a lot of interesting stories, but I almost want to start from the very beginning. Like, what was your childhood like? Did you get into construction at an early age?
Sure. Yeah, you really want to go way back.
Let's do it.
Definitely always been drawn into the industry. I had, my dad, we were making stuff when I was a kid. We made a soapbox car, he'd let me use the power tools. My uncle was extremely handy. He was a glazer. And so I would work on the summers, for him at a relatively young age. My lacrosse coach in high school, had a millwork company doing high quality commercial cabinetry, law office fit outs, etc. So I was an apprentice in his company when I was in high school and college. Wrestling coach got me into drywall. So I did a lot of the work all through college. I even had my own deck building business in the latter half of my college years. But then I fell into an internship with Clark my junior year of college. And that's where I kind of moved from that subcontractor level, maybe even residential scale stuff, into the more complex, commercial side of the industry.
Pause right there. What was Clark like at the beginning? Like, we're talking 90s, right? I'm not trying to age you, but I'm just curious, because what was construction like even back in the 90s? Like, how do you think about it nowadays?
It's very different in some ways than today. We were just making the move from Lotus 123 to Excel. We were still using some form of a spreadsheet to create our logs and everything, to log in RFIs that we were literally handwriting in a carbon triplicate form that are printed out. We got the curly Q thermal fax machines, we're sending stuff, and it was just a hair faster than snail mail.
Back then, were you seeing the benefits in digital? Like, was it becoming apparent to you, we need to move into this computer space? Maybe you didn't see what it looked like, but...
Yeah, I wouldn't say back then, but I don't know. I mean, at that point in time in my career, I was just trying to learn the craft and master that at every, stage. Every promotion was just learning and expanding responsibilities. That I had great mentors, and Clark did a wonderful job teaching and training, but also giving you the opportunity to go do it and, learn from your mistakes. So it was a really great way and a great company to work for, to learn the business. And I had also the good fortune of really being able to learn all facets of the business. I was like an assistant project manager, Then I got pulled into the field and I was doing a lot of work as a superintendent. And then I was always in the bid room. And back then, that's one of the big things that has changed. When my career started, it was a lot of the hard bid stuff. There was design build and this more pre-construction as like a real dedicated period of time was very, very limited, almost non-existent. And so, just learning the bid room, or now what is the front end of the business, appreciating getting the estimate and the budget set up right from the beginning, engaging the subcontractors in a process that, made sure that you had the most complete scope and complete price. And you also were aligning and, selecting the right subcontractor for the project that you knew could perform and do the work. And the broader business side of it, the contracts, the insurance, and all of those implications. I got a very well-rounded education and practice from a very, very, early part of my career. And then, my career ascended, got more and more into the P&L responsibilities. Yeah, it was a great experience. And I learned a lot in the 26 years there. And then, add the other 6 that have still remained in the industry. It's 32 years now in the industry.
Yeah, I bet you thought about retiring. I'm glad you didn't, because you're coming up with solutions that hopefully will make the industry better. But I'm curious, in that time, like I was alluding to, when it became super apparent that you need to dig in on some of these digital tools, but also I was kind of, as you were talking, I was thinking about the value in the 30 years of experience you had. Like, I can't even really comprehend how much you learned, but it is too, knowing that you weren't fully digital for a long time, and you talking about learning those businesses processes seems like it's kind of like teaching yourself math without a calculator before you start using the calculator, and how much greater you'd be at teaching the calculator great tricks if you knew how the math actually worked, if that makes any sense. Do you resonate with that?
I do. And I mean, that's kind of a cornerstone of why ConCntric is so powerful and beneficial, and why it's been so well received, is all of those years and that experience is, industry specific, pre-construction specific, and, all of that experience is guiding what we're building. And that would be pre-construction in particular would be, I think it's almost impossible for somebody from the outside to come in, really understand how that big machine really needs to be wired for it to run and run optimally for the user, who is the pre-construction pro. So yeah, I think that in itself is a differentiator for our company, rather than having outside technologists just come in with, fancy solutions from other industries, and they're trying to force fit it to our unique needs.
Yeah, I'm just like totally behind that movement. I think too, and it's not us in construction saying, hey, we're so smart, you won't understand it. We're not saying that. It's just, it is a complicated industry by nature of all the moving parts and the years that we've built these processes. I wonder too, if you could talk about, you probably went through a lot of times where you're throwing out old processes that don't work as well and holding on to ones that really are important. Can you talk about some of those differences? Like when you knew we need to stop doing that, even though it made sense in the past, it doesn't anymore.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that, but really what our mission is and what we're doing is, uniting the data, the workflows, and the people to combine all of that into something super collaborative and super powerful. And, key element of that is digitizing those workflows in a way that you can make less work, not more. But at the same time, the foundational aspects of each of those, 40 odd facets of pre-con that we're bringing from that pen and paper analog state. I say pen and paper, that's what we think of as Excel, and moving that into a more digitized platform grade solution. You're not throwing it away. Nobody's doing anything bad or wrong. What often is the case is they're not doing key things at all because they don't have the time and bandwidth to cover all of that. They're barely getting by with maybe the minimums. And so when we can solve the bandwidth issues they have, and we open up the opportunity for them to do the other things like really focus on the risk aspects or dig deeper to coordinate or better manage the development of the design, then you start to have a much more comprehensive and successful planning effort that then is going to yield a much more accurate outcome, a much smoother experience. And, it's what I always strive for is helping our customers. And back in the day, what I was trying to do for my clients at Clark is provide a certainty of outcome. Because in, what we do in the business, you go from an idea, you go through some, period of design, but that's still a matter of years. And then it takes you a few years to build it. I mean, all in, you could be in for 4 or 5. It could be we did hospitals that were design build, and we were in at the very beginning, like literally did not finish the project until 10 years later. That's a long time to go without really having a true assurance or confidence that the budget that I'm signing off today is going to be generally what we're finishing the job with, and there's no surprises.
Yeah. Predictability is a hard thing to accomplish in our industry. It feels like maybe an impossible thing to solve completely, but I think that's why I am pushing like all these tools that can help us. I feel like pre-construction especially, but that can help us build projects in theory or digitally before we build them physically. Like think through everything and actually build it out in a system and test it. I think that's where we get more predictability. I wanted to talk a little bit more about your experience at Clark. I read something on your LinkedIn that said you were able to maintain a litigation-free record and how do you think you accomplished that? And please tell me some of it was luck, because I haven't had any of my projects involved in litigation, but I started in forensics. So I started working on every project I worked on had ended up in the court system. So I just have this perception that they all have the potential to end up there. And if you didn't, then you got lucky.
Yeah. And keep in mind, it wasn't just me, everything you do, it's a team sport, and you've got everybody involved that, helped that achievement. But, it starts with good project selection too. Don't get involved in things with, a client that you don't feel comfortable with, and don't pick subs that you don't think could really do the job. And, I'm not talking about just intuition and gut feels. I mean, you gotta really dig in and do your homework. It starts there, but you're inevitably going to run into big problems if you don't pay attention to the details up front. If you don't pay attention to the contract and what's in there, and making sure you're not signing up for something that is going to be unfair, detrimental, or inappropriate risk shift. Our business is about risk, but not all of it needs to be borne by the contractor, right? You got an appropriate distribution of that risk to the best people who are there to address it. Setting the table for success is what I coin it to be. It's, it has everything to do with the right budget, making sure that the design is, exactly what people were expecting it to be. It's just, the devil's in the details. And again, it goes back to the bandwidth issue. If you are so consumed with just a bunch of non-value add work, just doing the same thing over and over and over, but wasting time and burning up bandwidth, and you don't have the time to dig into those details. And that's what separates a great job from a good job, and a good job from a bad job.
Yeah. You guys, you've decided to focus on pre-construction. I know you've talked about it in the past, why choose that and what makes pre-construction such an important part of construction. But give me a brief summary of, what is pre-construction for those of us, maybe there's people in college still wanting to enter the industry. Why are we separating pre-construction from construction?
Well, pre-construction is different because there's different people, different skill sets involved in that phase of the job. And then when you go out to build it, then you have a different, group of people that are engaged to go do that. The way you administer the two phases is very, very different. And you have different stakeholders involved in the day-to-day. You have almost all architects, engineers, and the owner at the table during the pre-construction phase. But then when you're building the job, it's much more like the general contractor and subcontractor. But I focused on pre-con because nobody else was, to the extent that it deserves. And where the industry has been changing over the last 2 decades is, like I shared at the very beginning, when I started my career, it was all largely the hard bid work and very little need for pre-construction, especially when you had a long gestation period on a job. But then everybody just got tired of the contentious relationships, the battles, the litigation, because the owners, the architect back then, they were almost setting themselves up for it to begin with, because they were designing in a vacuum. There was little to no input from a cost perspective, schedule, logistics, and the person that you're expecting to take the risk is coming in after all the cake is baked.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're also pitting them against 3 or 4 other people and taking who the lowest bidder is. So it was really set up with a gross misalignment of incentives. But when you can bring the contractor, everybody figured out, bring the contractor in early as a valuable member of that stakeholder group. And you can do that in different capacities. You could do a design build, or the architects also working under the GC. It doesn't matter. You're bringing everybody to the table, and all of their expertise as subject matter experts can now get plowed into the project in the planning stage. And everybody then is aligned to work together to tee it up for success. And then you get a much stronger predictability of outcome. The industry has shifted. We as contractors shifted in that we had people start to get really good at it. But in pre-con, there was no underlying system to support them. And to this day, we're the only platform that is there to support all facets of the pre-construction process. And it's, quite honestly, pre-con as a profession, career path where people have chosen to invest money, it has always been treated differently than the construction phase. And I came up as a PM, as an operations guy in the early part of my career. But in the latter half of my career, I had gained so much respect for how critical that phase was and how critical the professionals that do it, that I still to this day champion for anybody involved in pre-con that everybody's just as equally valuable. You've got to plan the job well and set it up for success. And then you can count on the people, the PMs and superintendents who go out and build it and execute it, to execute that plan. You can't have one without the other. And one is not more important than the other, but it has not been treated like that still to this day in most organizations. And we're here to really elevate and bring the focus to the impact and the quality that pre-com brings to a job.
Yeah, it feels like that relationship between sales and operations is such an important one, because I've seen it too. I've dabbled in both areas, estimating, even design a little bit from did one job I had for a couple years. I was designing, selling, estimating, and managing paver projects. So people's driveways, but I would go there, I would create a 3D design for them. I would be the one that would sell them, and I would estimate the work. And then I had to oversee the construction. And that one experience to me really helped me understand, the estimating people have to do a good job in order to set me up for success if I'm the PM. And I want to have a good relationship with them, because when that relationship is sour, it's bad. It doesn't go well. I wanted to talk about ConCntric, and you've been mentioning it as a platform and kind of differentiating it from a point solution. I know you've been talking about how many different kind of workflows there are even within pre-construction. And now we've got AI creating all these cool little kind of point solutions, but you're trying to be a platform. How are you looking at those things that you can add to ConCntric, or to create that this is where everything I need is for pre-construction?
Well, we have a very robust roadmap, because as very experienced builders, we understand the full definition and breadth of pre-con. And so Rome wasn't built in a day. So we started in, areas that first and foremost brought those stakeholders together in a very collaborative, productive way, and helped kind of the adage of, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. If one thing that we developed benefited the builder, the owner, the design team, that was where we wanted to start. And so, we, continue to progress through that roadmap and add more and more and more. So it's really a massive difference between a platform that's a multi-solution platform versus a point solution that does one thing, or that one thing is masked and, sold to do two or three different things, but using the same tool. I mean, that's just marketing spin, right? We've got the full breadth of features and modules that are solving the needs and what that workflow is designed to do in that context. And so, that's how you engage with an owner. That's how you engage with the design team. Context is extremely important. And so what you look at visually, what you're talking about topically, all of that needs to be handled so that way the communication is enhanced and the context around the numbers, the graphs, the output from the workflow is all, kept in that, same context, if you will.
I think I've read or heard you speak about it, but as you're gathering this data and you're kind of using it as fuel, like the past project data is the fuel for the engine now. Are you like, is all of your client base benefiting from that fuel, and will it just continue to be the case? And how do we get all of these AI, how do we teach them construction, I guess, is the simplest way to frame my question.
Yeah, no, our customers and their data on our platform is theirs, right? So they work within their data. And in the future, what I see for those who are open to it, they'd be able to get, and, if they give, they get. So if you can contribute, then you might have a much wider exposure to ideas or cost metrics, all of it obviously anonymized and protected, but it's very good referenceable information. So you can also be gauging and calibrating how you're looking at things against, data points outside of what you do, and the way you do it. But again, that's an optional thing. That's a future thing, because you have to be able to protect and guarantee that anonymity with that data and the industry and the comfort level. And we don't want to rush that. But the cool thing is, because you brought up AI, not only are we the first platform for pre-con, but we're also the first AI platform for pre-con. So as a customer now, with as much data that we have running through the platform in the hundreds of billions, now you can start to have that data work for you without you having to do a lot of entry. I mean, you can literally talk to our AI, our agentic solution, and task it to do work on your behalf with your data. It can also go out like you would go directly into ChatGPT. You can do that through Amplify, our AI solution, and it's going to tap those models and bring in very outside information that's very, very valuable, again, to provide you referenceability, context, do work for you. But your data is not training those models. It's not being exposed. So you get the best of both worlds with the way we've architected our agentic AI solution.
People probably will benefit most from their own data anyway, obviously, if you think about it. I just have this philosophy that I think if we could, and I bet you could talk to this too, it feels like the balancing plank is between openness of data, security, and how valuable that data can be to everyone at large. That's the give and take, the way that I see it. Yeah, do you run into that a lot? I do think my dream is to, like, for a client, let's say I work for the City College of San Francisco right now. If I could load up their pre-construction process, the data, if it was all cleaned and really operable, and I could load up the entire history of how they've done things in the past, and then just be able to say, how did we used to do this, and it would give me the process and start working on it for me. That seems like an amazing way to start. And if you're making it simple for construction, I say, hey, if you're out there and you have complicated pre-construction processes and you want to get exposure to AI, check out ConCntric and see.
Well, you don't even have to be a complicated project. I mean, we have built our company and the platform around not just serving big, complicated projects. This is designed to be used by small contractors that are doing, they could be doing the local, bank branch in a retail center. This is not geared to just serving complicated projects. This is really about making everybody more efficient and effective at what they do, no matter what the project and no matter what size contractor or company you are, as well as the owner and the design team. I mean, there's something in it for everybody. And we're really trying to make the success of the project, we're project first as a platform with the focus on if the project is successful, then everybody's probably succeeding.
You've talked about being like a mobile first. Do you have plans that you can talk about for how we're using mobile devices these days?
I mean, when there's a place for that mobile aspect of what we do in our workflows. There's extensions of the platform make it convenient that you could have a conversation with somebody, and if they were curious to know, hey, hotel, what is that going for these days on a cost per key basis? And if you could pull it up on your phone and just show them something basic and simple, but what people are doing planning this work, just that small device isn't necessarily the optimal, thing to be working with and in, but there's definitely things for convenience and easy access and referenceability that the mobile aspect as an extension of our platform is definitely on our roadmap in the right applications. Yeah. I mean, we want to make sure that we get the workflow right, that the data is getting structured, and we're taking care of the foundational elements here to make sure that everybody's pre-construction is going super well. And then if we can make it a little bit more convenient in certain aspects with something formatted for an iPhone, yeah, so be it.
And I bet you've definitely been in the shoes of most of the people you're probably selling tech to now. You've been sitting there running construction projects and evaluating tools like, is technology going to help us, the bottom line, whatnot. Do you think often about that? And is that, I mean, we're getting back to built by builders, but what do you see in those people that you're talking to? Do you see a lot of burnout and, hey, I've been sold a lot of tech and not a lot of it helps? Do you hear that a lot, and how do you talk about it?
Yeah, I think that's becoming more of a thing. We call it addition by subtraction, meaning with our platform and all the capability that it has, in pre-con, there's just not that many other options in terms of pre-existing point solutions. Our customers are using single point solution elements for specific things that our platform does, and in a much more powerful way. So they jump at the opportunity when we come on to start sunsetting and get rid of those costs and those, legacy solutions. So I think people are becoming more and more sensitive to, they don't need a collection of 150 to 200 different apps that they're paying for that are being used or not used. And, the convenience of being in one place where that data is there, it's being structured and maintained and protected properly, as opposed to, think about this. If somebody said, oh, okay, we got the 40 facets of pre-con and I'm going to solve each of those with, if they come around, a point solution for each. They're currently doing it in Excel, and it's not efficient, but anybody in the company knows how to manipulate Excel and move data from one to the other. Think about if you wake up and you've got 40 point solutions that don't talk to each other, or you got to wire up some fancy integrations and workarounds. How many people in your organization are expert enough to do that? So you've graduated from a very clumsy, analog, highly inefficient collection of spreadsheets. Now you have put yourself in a really much worse situation, because now you're locked into these individual point solutions, and you yourself don't know how to make one talk to the other. And that's the beauty and what everybody's looking for in a platform. Are you going to have a one platform fits all for everything, including construction, including your yard? No. But there's a smart way to slice up that pie for the areas of expertise and the skill sets and what those people are specifically addressing. Pre-con deserves its own platform. Construction management has its platform options. Design and what the designers are doing with, 3D design, Revit and all that, they've got their thing. So you might have an assembly of 3, 4, 5 major platforms that are positioned uniquely to address the unique needs of those segments. But God help anybody if they wake up with dozens and hundreds of individual point solutions, like a cluster of stars. I mean, I would be pulling my hair out. And I can tell you that not all software is equal either. You've got the older generation stuff that isn't on a foundation, if you will, that is conducive to today's day and age and what they're doing and how it stores the data and structures it. And then you've got, there's software out there that actually causes people to have to do more. And that used to drive me crazy when I was overseeing operations projects. And if we adopted back in the day project management software, which is different than the way it is today, but it literally turned everybody into data entry people. And, my project engineers and project managers were just more or less chained to the computer to populate all the fields to get the reports that people were looking for, as opposed to going out to the job, walking with the superintendent and the subcontractors and foremen to go solve problems. Just go figure it out and solve it and do something very productive. Just doing this all day to generate a report so you can report on the things that are screwed up on the job site, don't report the problem, don't report the news, make the news. Go out there and just fix it and prevent it. And so I'm a big fan of designing our platform, the user interface, to where it's drastically reducing what you have to do, even compared to an Excel spreadsheet. And we prove that time and time again with all of our ROI estimates that we do with our customers. I mean, it's proven.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
I really appreciate your efforts in doing that, because a lot of times I was the guy doing the data entry and hating it and wanting to go out and have an impact on a project instead of inputting numbers or manipulating PDFs or whatever it was I was doing and getting sick of. Do you mind let's talk more broadly about the construction industry? I feel like it's at an interesting place, maybe in history. And I think tech is a big part of that. But I also think we've just been calling for productivity improvements for 100 years and haven't seen them. And I always used to ask my dad, like, is history really getting as bad as it seems? Like, you're older than me. You've been around longer. Are we going to make some big strides at being able to build projects cheaper and faster and keep everybody happier, be more profitable? Are we going to get better at that?
I think we will. I think everybody's ready for some change. I think the industry has plenty of room for improvement. And I think it's not all about technology. It's about having the right people, bringing people into our industry. We need to, because we don't have enough people and it's only going to get worse. So we have to start attracting different people from different, backgrounds in terms of skill sets and whatnot, because it's a great industry. I mean, there's very few industries where, the product of your effort is physical. You can walk down the street and point to it. My girls growing up, just loved to be able to see in any city that we lived in and point to the things that I was involved in, and that's awesome. But there's a lot to be fixed. I think we've made over the years and even decades, we've made good strides in some areas. In other areas, we've just really not hit hard enough, and we have some catching up to do. Precon was one of them. And so, I'm so focused on precon. Like I said, my background, I did plenty of it, but I also did plenty of all of the other aspects of the business. But I know it well, and I know it's the one that is probably going to be the hardest for people to figure out. And if I can be the one that figures it out for the benefit of the industry, then, I was ready to take on that challenge. And when you talk about affecting change that allows projects that currently people don't think are affordable, but now, they're 10 or 15% less than what people perceive them to be, because you're using better data, you're getting a higher degree of confidence in, your numbers and your plan, that makes a difference. That could be the difference between whether some school gets built or doesn't get built, or a hospital that people depend on and need actually goes forward and gets built. These are things that have an opportunity to affect people's lives. It's the next research center that may cure something. I mean, construction and builders and architects and the owners and developers that are involved in those projects, I mean, that's what you are delivering, is a facility that empowers other things to then be invented or discovered or, otherwise educated in terms of inspiring other people. It's really cool.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I do have mixed feelings about our industry, but anytime you love something enough, you're more critical of it, I think. I think that's just kind of how it works. I think, like, I'm married and my wife is very good at being critical of me, and it's because she loves me and cares about me, and I appreciate that most of the time. I'm getting better at appreciating it. But that being said, I love the construction industry. I agree at 100 and a million percent with you about we can't do anything without building infrastructure for whatever it is we want to do. We can't sleep without a roof over our head and a bed underneath us. I mean, we can, but it's not as nice. And I think as excited as we are about AI and technology and how much that's growing, we need to build stuff to even have that. We can't have any of that AI stuff without the infrastructure, the power, the data centers. And just still, we got to have roads and transportation. We got to have all the stuff. So we can't stop building anything. And as advanced as we want to get, we're going to have to get more advanced at building stuff. But all that being said, and I kind of tried to look up, I think you've answered this question a few times, like why start a contact company like after a long career in the construction industry? And I feel like I heard you answer it kind of just, and I completely agree with this sentiment. The construction industry has given you a lot and you want to give back. And I do completely agree with that. I feel the same way, but I also feel like, man, the construction industry has beat me up a lot too. And I think I'm resilient, so I've seen it really beat people up. And I don't know if you have advice for people who maybe did stick around for a long career in construction, but they're just done. I kind of want to keep those people like interested and bring them back like you and say, like, can you help us keep your knowledge? And then I also want you to talk to the young people about why come build stuff.
Yeah. No, those are all, fantastic initiatives and missions. And, you see it happening more and more where people, yeah, they're ready to retire from the daily grind, but they're not ready to just sit around and do nothing. And so they come back and they want to help, train or mentor and participate without the daily obligation of fighting in the trenches. Yeah. The cool thing about the industry, though, is, you learn a lot. You learn it with, a lot of great people. The camaraderie, is second to none. You just work with great people. And as long as you treat people with respect, and, as a team, it's just a fun industry. I couldn't think about having it not part of my life and doing something entirely different. And so when I did get to a point where I could not imagine running a construction company off of the status quo. And if that's what I had to do for the next 20 years, I was definitely not going to do that. So I said, well, what am I going to do? And I was very passionate about the opportunity, what it would look like. I just knew it could be so much better if you had a few things. If you had the data at your fingertips, why does everything have to be in Excel when all these other industries are advancing at the rate they are? I mean, it just drove me bonkers. And I just said, you know what? I can do something about this and still contribute and be a part of building projects, but build the tools that people then can use to drive their own success. And that excited me. So it was almost like the second half. I had the first half of the game, then halftime, and then I came out of the, into the arena for the second half of the game, but it was doing something slightly different, but still same sport.
It's awesome. Well, we'll call this the third quarter. I think you got a long time to go, and I'm excited to see what the second half brings you. What about the young people? Do you want to address them? What should they be thinking about if they are interested in construction, and should they be interested in our industry?
Well, they should. I took great pride in the people that worked for me throughout my career. It was all about helping them learn. Helping them learn the industry inside and out. And what I would always counsel them is, your progression in your career is not this kind of a list of badges. Like if you were in Cub Scouts and, okay, I did this, I get this badge, I do this, and I graduate and I become like a Weeble or whatever. It was literally people would think about this like this checklist. All right, I wrote a bunch of RFIs, so therefore can I be promoted? Like, just slow down. Actually do this and master your craft at every level and absorb it and know it and put yourself out there to jump into the fire and figure out the problems and solve the problems and get beat up a little bit. That's how you learn our industry, because you oftentimes will learn, I did, when something goes wrong or a project doesn't turn out great, you learn 2 or 3 projects worth of lessons in one project versus the projects that just go smoothly and they're on autopilot. You don't really learn much from that. So, the young people I'd always just counsel them not to necessarily slow down, but to slow down their expectations of advancement just so they can get some title on a business card. Actually learn the craft. I would walk with the foreman, with the mechanical sub or the electrical sub, and just ask them so many questions. I learned a lot, but I also did was earn their respect because I was respectful of them and I showed an interest in what they do. And I just put myself out there and I said, hey, I was very deferential because I was talking to foremen that at the time, well, it could have been my grandfather. Am I going to be bossy and talk to them like any different than I would my grandfather? Heck no. So I respected them, and then they would take me under their wing and I would learn a lot and they would look out after me. And if I was about to make a bad call as the project manager, they would kind of pull me over and say, I wouldn't do that. And here's why. So they were looking out for me. So that respect kind of went both ways, but it was earned. So that's part of that learning process. Isn't just about, I filled out these forms. It's learning how to relate to the people on the job site that are kind of coming from all walks of life. You could be walking a billionaire through their development and showing them the progress on the job, but then immediately, and then the true story, that just say, hey, excuse me for a minute, to the billionaire, and you turn around and you might see a laborer doing something that wasn't safe. Mm-hmm. So you stop them and you just have a quiet conversation with them to challenge their thinking about why would they put themselves at risk for pennies, really, when you'd rather have them go home in one piece, the same way they came to the job to go see their kids and their loved ones. So you're dealing with people, different levels, different backgrounds. They're all there to contribute to the common cause, which is the success of the project. And, that's not a box checking exercise.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I just want to echo it because I did spend a lot of my early career caring more about how to make more money than how buildings get built, And I do think that does you a disservice. It's hard though. And I think you were getting to it too. There's so many people on construction projects. You've got people, even those of us in management, construction management, sometimes early in our career, we're sometimes still myself, I'm a blown tire away from, a really bad financial situation at certain times. So it's like, yeah, but I want that raise so that I can grow a family or buy a house or whatever. But I just really do want to remind everyone also just, yeah, money's important. Take care of money, advocate for yourself, get paid better, do that. But focus on learning, focus on feeding your curiosity. Do you know how a building gets built? If you don't, and you're working on construction projects, learn. You're sitting there, and it's an interesting process and it's a valuable skill that isn't going to go away. That value is going to be there no matter what technology does. I think knowing how buildings get built is always going to be important. Anything else you want to talk about? Do you want to tell people to check out ConCntric or reach out to you?
Yes, of course. I mean, ConCntric, if you hit us up on our website, any one of the team can share and show what we're all about. And that's ConCntric, ConCntric.com, and connect with me on LinkedIn. I love getting connected with everybody. So just look me up on LinkedIn, Steve Dell'Orto. And yeah, I appreciate, coming on to the Constructive Podcast, because again, this is how we get the word out, obviously for ConCntric, but this is about really improving the industry, and we all need to be talking about it and doing something about it. And so what you're doing is, really helping get that word out and get the attention and focus on it, which is
I appreciate you saying that.